Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. What we would love is to invite you to check in the chat by typing in where you're dialing in from and how you're doing today. So this way you can get a bit of a sense of how everyone is and where everyone is coming in from. And Reggie, keeping going with the bell might the bowl might be a good idea.
Oh, right on.
Claire, it feels like maybe we could kick things off. So we'll just invite everyone to keep checking in by typing into the chat, just where you're dialing in from, how you're doing today. We're feeling really, really, really excited about this series, and it feels wonderful to be at this moment of launching this with the wonderful Sharon Salzberg, with the wonderful Reggie Hubbard. Feeling excited about this combination and this to have an elder and an elder in training taking on this series, which is really about sitting at the feet of our elders. So I'll just share a couple of places where this came from us, which is why we're so excited at a really deep level about this series. We actually have a number of elders on our team. I think a couple of them are on this webinar with us. So we have 6 elders on our team, and they have brought an absolutely extraordinary presence and holding and care to our entire group. And it really has been a space for compassion, care, and wisdom. And so we've just really at a firsthand level experienced what it means to actually have that kind of eldership present with us. So that's one of the places, like just from lived experience. The other thing too for us is just really being aware that there's an extraordinary generation of teachers that are elders that have pioneered so much over the last 40 or 50 years in many different ways, in ways that have rippled out and touched all of our lives. And it feels important to in a way, spend time with them as they start to move to a different cycle in their lives, and to be in a place where we can receive, in a way, that transmission for all of us that are change making at this moment. So we're really, really grateful to also have that space to literally sit at the feet of our elders. So that's a little bit of the background of the series. I wonder if Claire, are you still there? Was there anything that you'd like to share as a little bit of framing for this too? I think Claire might have dropped off. So I'm sure she'll be back. She probably went to look for an elder to bring to the series. But maybe what we could do is kick things off by turning it over to Sharon. So I think all of you, or many of you on this webinar, have spent time with Sharon in this series before and in other settings as well. We're so deeply grateful to have her back co-hosting this series over the next many months. And what we'd love to do is ask Sharon to talk to us a little bit about her own journey and even the beginnings of her journey and how that was really influenced, supported, touched by elders. So Sharon, would love to turn it over to you and start us off.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be back with this wonderful community to welcome Reggie and have this opportunity to play with him. And it's really great. And when you said an elder, I kind of do what I did, which I just looked around like where, like I have a hard time identifying with that to some degree. But I also want to say you said that, Aaron, so gently, something about before they go into their next cycle, that was a very gentle way of saying die. And that is also a truth of physical older age. So, but when I think of elders, I think most often at any age of a Tibetan Buddhist illustration or image that they use a lot. And that sort of exemplifies what being an elder means to me, and again, at any age. So the image is, imagine you are quite an elderly person sitting in a playground watching children play. This is how one might look at thought patterns or emotional states or life experience. So you're quite an elderly person. That means you've seen a lot. You've probably had to let go of a lot. There's been a lot of change, a lot of circumstance coming and going in your life. And you see this little kid freaking out because they break a shovel. So what do? You have warmth, you have tenderness, you have compassion. You don't have disdain or coldness. You don't go up to them and say, it's just a shovel, kid. Wait till you have a real problem. Wait till you have arthritis or a mortgage or something like that. There's tremendous loving kindness and compassion. And you also don't fall down on the ground sobbing. Because you know what? Shovels break, bodies break, relationships break, lives break. So there's some space, there's perspective. There's some deep, deep knowing life can be like this. And it's not cold because you accompanying that is you're not alone. This is like a part of life. We can deal, we can handle this. And I realized that all my life, in a way, I've been searching for that combination. Like if I were to tell somebody my difficulties, my challenges, my sorrows, I certainly didn't want them to say like, it's just a shovel, get over it. But at the same time, if they fell down on the ground sobbing, I'd be terrified. I want that sense of there's something bigger. Maybe I don't know what it is, but I know it is. And it doesn't have to be verbal. It can be a sound. It can be a poem, or it can be a work of art. It can be a look in someone's eye. And if I find it, then I feel that, oh, that's the place where I'm seen, where I'm cared for, and there's an opening beyond that. And so not only, of course, do we seek that, I think, as individuals, but we can be offering that in some way. So I went to India, as many of you know, when I was 18 years old, looking for exactly that. I wanted somebody to recognize the emotional pain that I was in from my childhood, and yet not sort of leave me there, but have something bigger that might be. And I feel incredibly grateful that in my life, I've had many teachers from that age, different teachers at different times. And right now, I have a Tibetan Buddhist teacher who's younger than I am, which is interesting. But he still plays that role because that's the role. And so I think of myself more as that student, not so much as a seeker, because I feel very fulfilled, but as somebody who is learning and studying and so on, much more than as the elder in the room. But no doubt that is true, which brings up all those other things about remembering all that letting go and remembering life experience, and that this is precious, this is valuable, and this is something that I want to be able to convey, as I relate to people. So, Reggie, what would you say when you elder in training, up and coming elder? I don't know what the phrase is.
Well, my first question to you is like, well, hello everyone. Reggie Hubbard, he, him, his, dialing in from the DC Metro. I see some familiar faces. Wellington, hello friend, blessings and love. Mwah. Bon dia. Other people who I love and adore. Hello, hello. Sharon, my first question for you is, what was it like as you've gotten older? I mean, when we were in pre-production, you first were like, oh, and to some extent I'm that way. When people are like, Mr. Hubbard, I'm like, that's my dad. But so my question for you is, as you have gotten older, what's that been like?
It's everything, of course, and it's something to be grateful for, given one could be in a different cycle. Or I was talking to a medical supply company about a portable oxygen machine, and I asked if people ever return them, and they said, well, when they don't need oxygen anymore, which is another delicate way of saying, they've gone to a different cycle. It's a mystery, I mean, it's the passage of time is outrageous. It's fast. Everyone always says that, and you think can't be, and it is. Life is precious. It's so fragile. And going from that place, I still have that temptation, like when Aaron said elder, to look around, like where. I don't relate in that way. And chronology is just chronology. I prefer to go back to that image and think, okay, that's what it means. Mm-hmm. That's what it actually means. That's what it should mean. And there's something to be said. I do feel like the retreat center I co-founded, which is right next door through the woods, we started in 1976. And there will be a time when those of us who were here in the beginning have cycles on, we don't need our oxygen machines anymore. And we need to acknowledge that there's something to be captured, there's something to be preserved, and it's going to be different. I'm of an era, I had a certain life experience in terms of meditation, which was going to Asia. All of my teachers are Asian. And there's generations of people who study with us. And that's what they refer to. It's not, going back to another country. And so it's just a mystery. It's like so strange.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my experience with elders, and that I think of eldership in the context of my ancestors. So like, as someone who is a descendant of enslaved people, I don't say slaves because like that diminishes their humanity, but as a descendant of enslaved humans, I think about the struggles of my ancestors and what they've been through in order for me to live the life that I live. So when I think about elders, I think of the sacrifices they made in having reverence for my ancestors, not just those for whom I'm connected to biologically, but for those who I'm connected to culturally or spiritually. Because one of the blessings of not only this series, but the conversations that we hope to have, is that there is wisdom to be harvested, not from a utilitarian perspective, but for our collective well-being. Like, odds are, if you've lived long enough, you've got something to say and something to share. And American culture, and we talked about this in pre-production, views life as disposable. And after a certain number, you don't have relevance anymore. How awful is that, right? And like, in defiance of that norm, I'm excited for this series, not just for the celebration of my ancestors and the whole concept of ancestors, but just to talk about the wisdom that can be shared in order for us to not make mistakes. Like, we also joked that in certain parts, in the pre-production for this, I said to myself, I'm middle-aged, but actually I checked that I'm an elder in training, because it's far more chic than middle-aged. Middle-aged is kind of blasé. in certain parts of the world, I am an elder, right? So in the political world, the campaign world, which I still have I would say a couple toes, but it's a big foot. I still have a big foot in the campaign world. There are they're 22-year-olds for whom this elder in training is an elder. And I can share the wisdom of 25 years of doing things the wrong way in politics. For them to not have the benefit of some of the like circuitous paths I had, because a beltway is cool, but sometimes you need a conversation with an elder can give you an avenue to an expressway as opposed to being stuck on the beltway. For those who live in DC, you know that the beltway is not where you want to be all the time. So that's what I would say with respect to eldership and ancestral reverence.
I love that because it emphasizes something that I was, mentioning, which is like love of learning. It's checking one's assumptions, first of all, because cultures are different, but certainly there's a slice of American U.S. culture which has a lot of disdain for people who are older, if that's the status with which one has achieved eldership. And we don't necessarily listen, we don't necessarily ask. And so I too am very excited about this series because it's an opportunity to sit down with some people and really feel into their experience. I think of, we once brought the head of a Burmese Buddhist lineage here to the US, and he was quite old. He was very revered as the patriarch of the lineage, but he was very like chill, there was not a lot of emotional intensity or expression even, he was just like, and it was very difficult for a lot of people. And then we found out that when he was much younger, he proposed certain changes in the way the meditation practice was done. And because of those changes, it actually opened up the possibility of a very liberating practice to women, to householders. It was no longer kind of held in the possession of monks who could spend decades in solitary practice. He really opened it up, and he was considered a heretic, and he'd go to certain places and they'd throw rocks at him and things like that. And I said it was sort of like finding out your grandmother was a radical, politically in her youth. It's like you never guess. And there it was, it was like a whole other aspect. Like, how did you get to be that chill? How did you get to be so profoundly revered? And we don't often have that conversation with people.
I love that you mentioned that, because one of the things that not only with the concept of disposability, is just like we don't have conversations anymore. You know what I mean? Several of you know this. I'm in the process of writing a book. People have lost their love of prose, right? Everything's in 140 characters or less. Which I guess is cool, but I think I'm the only activist that's not on Twitter. I don't really care like that. But we don't have conversations anymore. Like, we don't have intergenerational conversations, and we don't have conversations intergenerationally in community. And so I love that all of y'all are here with us, because we want you to come along for the ride. We want you to come along and not have that. There's a reason that we chose to do this with us and y'all, and not just have this as a broadcast. Like, we want your comments, we welcome your questions, and we want you to learn with us together, because we're all on the journey. And, as my grandmother, who I still have at 96 years old, said, if you live long enough, you're going to lose something, but you might gain something too, right? So, like, hopefully when we talk with these elders, it'll assist us in our elders in training and just make us more receptive to the wisdom that they have, that we can all use and for the better benefit of our society.
Well, one thing I learned was in having so many different teachers sequentially was not to look for utter perfection. There are still jewels in that conversation, in that transmission. And I think sometimes it was quite specific. This teacher really showed me what it was like to be more fearless. And that teacher was so structured, really helped me in a time when I needed structure. And that one, and some of what we miss, I think, is because we are looking for a kind of perfection. And We don't need to be. We can absorb, we can learn, we can be delighted by some aspect of someone's being.
Right. And so I guess the question that comes to mind, Sharon, is like, what do you look for from an elder, and how do you go about finding one? Let's talk about that for a little bit.
I look for well, it's really the combo. I look for compassion and perspective. And I think that is true compassion anyway, when there's perspective, rather than someone, being so stricken by the pain you're in that they fall down to the ground and are crushed by it. That's not that helpful. Well, it's understandable. It's very understandable, but it's not that helpful. So I really look for that combination of, or you could say true compassion. And I think that you can feel that, when people are kind of on your side, they're telling you that story or they're recounting that history because they are on your side, basically, not for their ego glorification or something like that. And how you find one, they're everywhere, it's kind of a question of listening mostly, I think, and asking questions. Like, I'm curious, Reggie, if you had political elders that you looked up to who helped inspire you, because that's one of the things also I think I've gotten the most, is that people have faith in me. They really they've lived enough, so that they see you fall down, you can get up, something like that. And there's that, again, perspective. And so I absorb that faith in me, even if I'm feeling rather more doubtful myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I for a whole host of reasons, I didn't have many actual elders. Let's just be honest about how things work in the States. Like, most people like suppress Black talent and wisdom. But like, my elders were in books. You know what I mean? So I harvested the speeches of Martin Luther King and like Stokely Carmichael. I read the stories of Nat Turner. I read the stories of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. And so that's part of the reason why I come in hot. Like, sometimes people are like, Reggie, you got a lot of passion. I was like, it's not just me, it's us, right? And so, like, I harvested their wisdom, harvested their intellect, and have been able to use that to inform my journey. And now I've gone out of my way to accept the mantle of elder in training. Like, I'm still in training, though. But I've gone out of my way to accept that mantle so that people because politics is kind of rough and tumble, and not many people look out for others and shepherd them along. So the gift that I've been given is that because I didn't have like actual elders in real life, and I had to like kind of make my way and trip and fall down and get blacklisted and all these other things, like, I've got a little bit of things to share. And it's not that I am that wax sculpture that you talked about, but I'm nowhere near as fiery as I used to be. And that's probably good for my blood pressure and my adrenal glands. But like, I have become that elder, but my elders were mostly of lore and in books.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because there's something obviously so timeless about one's words when it's in a book or available in some way, and it's without interpretation. You're not having to go through a barrier of someone else's view of what this person said. It's like, this is what they said.
Right.
And it's a very beautiful thing. So
Sharon,
that way we have the wealth of the world, that could be serving in that way for us.
I had a question for you quickly, Sharon. Like, how do you dare to ask an elder for their time? I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Like, I'm way too brash for some. For me, I think I'm all good. But for those who aren't as brash as me, like, what guidance would you give about how to ask an elder for their time?
I haven't experienced, I'm not brash, but at all as a person, but I haven't experienced that so much as the issue as people usually don't ask. And I found people are kind of delighted, like, really? You want to talk to me? Like, and like, I grew up in part with my grandparents, and it was only when I got older that I thought they were immigrants. What's that like? to leave everything behind and all security, and and they did it for their families, or they did it for their children. And look at that, what was that like? Or very famously, men who fought in the Second World War from the States would never talk about the experience. And it was decades later, if anybody, not everybody by any means, but some people saw what was happening in the world and wanted to be part of that conversation in some way. So it's like a permission structure to be able to convey, yeah, your experience is valuable, it's worth it.
And I appreciate you mentioning that, because there is a compassion that we can show towards people by asking them their story. Like for people, this is kind of an undiscussed part of eldership. Most elders feel forgotten. And so just asking like, hey, what was it like when you ... I've asked older people that, in like an hour and a half later, like not only was my mind blown, but I was just like, whoa, like they were lighter too. Like they felt not only validated, but seen, right? Seen and appreciated. When the body starts to fail, when the mind starts to go, like there's a certain darkness that can come on what was once a light-filled life. And so someone showing interest in that light-filled life has tremendous, not only compassion for them, but it's a compassionate act for yourself to show interest in another's story.
And I think, people are putting really interesting things in the chat, including, the difference between being old and being an elder. And, and based on what you just said, Reggie, and some of those comments, we also need compassion and patience to realize people have their own rhythm. And often when you're older, if that's the way eldership has come about, it's slower, there are pauses, and to really listen to a person, to realize from their point of view, that obstacle they see in front of them, for example, is not small. A friend of mine told me about his mother once. He said when she was younger, she was madly adventurous, traveled around the world and did all these things well before he did. And as she got older, she got more restrained, and careful. And they were taking a walk one day, and there was like a little bitty incline in the sidewalk. And she said, I can't do that. I can't go up that. And at first he was very impatient and really pushing. And then he realized, for her, that was not an itty bitty little incline. That was like Mount Everest, And then he just had to let go of that assumption, like, you can have this capacity, you can have that capacity. Or if you don't, then why spend time with you? It's so much can happen in just conversation, or just being there, present, observing something together, as a kind of companion. There's so much that can happen that is going to be hampered by thinking this, she should be just as she used to be.
Right. Some of the best experiences I've had in my adult life are road trips with my grandma, and like asking her, one of the things she said one time that almost had me floored while I was driving, she was like, yeah, that Mac the Knife rendition that Satchmo did was cooler than the one that everyone else talks about. I was like, Satchmo, whoa, right? Like, so in her mind, Satchmo is present. And from a historical analysis, Louis Armstrong's been dead since 1960, but like in her life, like she talks about Mac the Knife and Satchmo with such presence. Like I was just like, I need to like pay attention to the road, like, because for those of you who don't know, I used to play jazz music, and so I was like, you talk about Satch in the present tense, man, like whoa, like so super like humbling, but also just very exciting. And if we didn't have, like to your point, Sharon, about taking time with things, if we didn't have that 4-hour road trip, there's no way that we would have be listening to NPR and then this Mac the Knife would come on, and then she's like, "This is all right, but this ain't as hitting as the one that was Satchmo, Grandma." Wow, you said hitting and Satchmo. You were a wild girl, huh? and for reference, my grandmother at her 90th birthday tore up the dance floor, right? And so, like, it's one of the things that we forget, that people who have made it in years were once young, and that is something that we should not only solicit in terms of their stories, but the body may be old, but maybe the spirit is still young. And that's what I'm excited about in this series, is maybe harvesting some of that youthful spirit that can inform us in these darkened days. The people think everything is so doom and gloom, and sure, there's a lot of stuff that's not cool right now. But like, if my grandmother is a dark-skinned Black woman who grew up in the Jim Crow South, like, if she can still smile, some of us can still smile too, right? Like, it's just, it's, you know, I see in the chat a lot about perspective. That's one of the beautiful things I'm excited about in our journey together, is not only getting the perspective of other people, but talking about that perspective with the community. And to that point, community, I'm an organizer, right? So these questions I'm asking Sharon, I'm asking you too. So, like, what are you looking for in an elder? What do you look for in an elder? Like, you know, are you an elder in training? Like, be engaged. Like, this is not, I don't teach like at you, I teach with you, right? So those questions are for you too. So blow up the chat so we can have the benefit of your wisdom learning in Sangha, as opposed to like a pedagogy that's just unilateral. I told you I'm writing a book, so yes, that's pedagogy and unilateral in the same sentence.
Reggie, what year was your grandma born?
1926.
Okay, so just think of that, everything that's changed in her world and the world since 1926.
There were no computers, like cars were just getting going, right? Like, yeah. There was definitely no such thing. Barack Obama's an afterthought. Like, there was no thought of a Black president in 26, right? Like so that's an interesting reflection too, Sharon.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And actually, you just gave me a memory. So about you know, my first book was called Loving Kindness, and it came out, I don't know how many years ago. It came out in 95, and it was really arduous for me to write. I didn't have a personal computer. Almost nobody I knew had a personal computer. Mm-hmm. So cutting and pasting meant getting a pair of scissors and cutting out the paragraph that you wanted to move and moving it up and down, and then realizing where you wanted it. So getting a roll of Scotch tape and taping it, that was cutting and pasting. Nice. And I was hugely intimidated. I thought I could never learn how to use a thing like that, ever. You know, it's like so beyond me. And then I was here in Barre, Mass, and at the Insight Meditation Society. And one day we had a visit from a 94-year-old Sri Lankan monk. And we were just chatting with him for a while, and he mentioned he was learning how to use a computer. So I thought, okay, he's 94 years old. He's learning how to use a computer. Maybe I can learn how to use a computer. And I did, and therefore we have Loving Kindness. But interestingly enough, he said afterwards, and this goes to some of the things people are putting in the chat about the body and getting older. He said, I want to go, we had a retreat that was happening. He said, I want to go into the meditation hall and give a talk. So I thought, okay, 94 years old, not going to be a very long talk. We can do it. And it was an endless talk. It was like so long because he had so much energy. And he said in the course of the talk, I want to teach you my favorite meditation, which was basically, these days we would say a combination of a body scan and loving kindness. So he went through his body. May my head be happy. May it be peaceful. May my eyes be happy. May my ears. He just went through his whole body. And I was sitting there thinking, no wonder he has so much energy. You know, look at what he's doing. Instead of resenting moving slowly or, you know, whatever. It's like, look at that. So there's so much to be learned, and it's so precious.
Yeah, I'm inspired by the chat. So thank y'all for taking me up on my entreaty. I didn't mean to come at you hard, but like, listen, this is us, right? We're all in this together. And if we're blessed, we're going to be elders together, at least through the course of this journey. Sharon, might we transition to a point of practice, right? Because, I know you and I are, but we can't be in community and not have some sort of practice. I'll take the lead for that. So this kind of came as an audible, but as a jazz musician, we love improvisation. If you look behind me, I have a gong. I have more than one gong. I have like 18, but who's counting? You can't see the other ones. But the gong that's in plain view is 100 years old, from India. That a friend of mine was like, Reggie, you got to have this gong. I was like, I don't know if I need it. He's like, it's 100 years old from a temple. Okay, all right, how much is it? Right. And so anyway, I bit the bullet and got it. And part of my personal practice is sonic. So not only as a recovering musician, and most of my equipment and instruments are antique. So when we talk about the concept of eldership, there's wisdom that is from something having been around for a while. So not always, like I got into a conversation with someone last week. They're like, I've been doing this for 20 years. And I'm like, yeah, and you're decidedly mediocre. Blessings and peace. Like, don't throw that at me. But anyway, like in terms of like an object, whether it be an heirloom or an instrument, there is a wisdom to it. It has outlasted its initial owner. And what I want to encourage you to do is I'm going to play this gong, and I'm going to play this bowl. This bowl is 320 years old, right? And just, to Sharon's point think about like when this thing was made, there was no such thing as the internet. They may have been in like celestial circles, but it wasn't like in real-time practicality. So when I play these bowls and gongs, think about the chain of custody. So like over 100 years, what has that gong seen? What over 320 years, what has this bowl seen? And then, especially with respect to this bowl has a lighter cadence than the gong. Allow the gong to bring you the groundedness of eldership, right? So the grounded, timeless nature of being rooted to lineage, being rooted to history, not as a prescriptive measure, but as a baseline. And this, allow it to be the clearing of the mind that wisdom offers when we receive it. So I'll start with the gong. So first things first, allow yourself to be in a posture to receive sound. So maybe you shrug the shoulders, but just be ready to receive the wisdom of sound. Stretch the fingers a bit. And as I make my way back, I'll play this for about 2 or 3 minutes with regular cadence. I'll play the bowl for about 2 or 3 minutes. Be enlivened and enlightened by the wisdom that's offered through these sounds. One clearing breath to begin. Deep in through the nose. Exhale, clear. Let the wisdom begin. And as the ancient wisdom of this timeless treasure fades into the nethers, let's celebrate silence and see what the wisdom of the sound has offered us. And as we transition to Dear Sharon, place one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, to be present with the breath and the body. It is my hope that the gong left you grounded, that the bowl left you lifted. And from this space, 3 clearing breaths, then on to Dear Sharon. Inhale through the nose. Exhale, release. Inhale deeply. Exhale sweetly. Inhale. Exhale. Dear Sharon.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful also to kind of know the relative age of the gong, and that it's like the sounds of that era, that time, and it's both timeless and of that time. It's really beautiful. So I want to continue on with some practice for a little bit. You can close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. Feel into that space of sound and silence, of sheer space that was created. And since we're all different ages, I would say, see if you can call up an image of yourself from 20 years ago, 20, 25 years ago, however old you were then, and offer to yourself, through silently repeating whatever phrases make sense to you, kind of blessing. What would you have said to yourself at that age? People ask me that sometimes, and I say, it's going to be okay after all. Just whatever comes to mind, and you can just repeat gently whatever phrases, whatever sentences come. Your mind may wander, that's fine. You can recognize that. Just see if you can gently let go. Come back to the exercise. You see the image, you repeat the phrases. No blame, no judgment. And then yourself now, in this moment. See what phrases come to mind as you offer that sense of blessing, of loving kindness to yourself. People say things like, don't give up, or it's okay. Things change. Whatever may appear for you. It's a quote, Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, happiness is available. Please help yourself. That's a good reminder sometimes. Let's do 10 years from now. You can get that image, however it appears to you. You think it's any different from what you would say to yourself now? Maybe, maybe not. Let's try 20 years from now. If you have not gone into another cycle. What is that blessing? And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation. Back in the present moment.
Thank you, Sharon. Any reflections in the chat on how the practice has felt? Maybe it hasn't landed. Then give it some time to land. I'm sure when you woke up this morning, you weren't like, I'm going to be listening to a century-old gong, right? So like some of you talked about how it kind of reverberated. That's kind of the point, right? Because when we're met with elders, when we're in the presence of an enlightened elder, it is grounding. It is somewhat disconcerting, but in the best possible way. When we were at the Wellbeing Summit in Bilbao last year, I taught the opening practice, but the next day Satish Kumar was teaching, and I was there, like in the front row, like this, trying to just get not only wisdom, but I was like, let me get some of that energy. Like, let me like be. If I'm half the activist that you were, like I would consider my life beyond well lived. So reflections in the chat are welcome. And I guess I'll take this opportunity to segue into another conversation about why this is important at this moment. Y'all, we are emerging from a once in a lifetime experience, again, bringing my grandmother into the space. In 2021, when we were able to re-engage with folks, I asked her a question. I was like, Mama, have you ever seen anything like this in your life? So this was like this was 2020 heading into the election. We were on the phone, and this is like the coronavirus and the craziness from the last administration in the United States. And she was like, no. Right, I thought she was gonna say more than that, but she said no. And we need to explore these questions together, right? Because to some extent, we're a terra nova, right? Like we're in a whole new world, and learning and hearing the stories from others in community can only inform our work. You know, Aaron talked about change makers. Like most of us on this call are trying to make change on a macro or micro scale, and we don't have all the answers. But if we ask the right questions in community, I am beyond excited about what that holds for us, right? So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about like you said, Sharon, like hanging with you so much and like learning with and from you. I'm excited about learning from everyone in this community. I'm excited about us normalizing conversations of eldership. I saw a commercial the other day that kind of made my like back hurt. It's like anti-aging. I was like, how you gonna be anti-aging though? Right? Like that's how this thing goes, right? You know, like you either age or you don't, you have another cycle, right? Like, so like, to be anti-aging is kind of anti-life, right? So like to normalize conversations about the transitions and the cycles, I think is important for us in a micro and macro sense. And I could go on forever, but I will pass it to you because I'm about to catch the Holy Spirit.
Actually, you had me think of, I want to see that. You had me think of two things. One, when you said, if I had become half the activist that you are, that made me think of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what responsibility do any of us have toward the things we care about the most and upholding them and transmitting them, you know, onward, or, you know, that's a whole topic in itself. And also, and also somebody put in the chat something about grief, and there's a kind of grieving also of letting go of that image of the person as they used to be, perhaps, and that was the context in which they put it in the chat, or looking at these elders and thinking that was an amazing generation and it's passing. Look at what's happening, you know. Could any of us ever have the courage and the audacity, you know, to think big the way they did, or whatever it might be? And it's just very interesting. I think grief is always a part of recognizing transition and change. And there's also that sneaky little question of responsibility, like, it's up to me? Woo! It's a problem for humankind. I'm the elder. Oh boy! Oh,
how'd this happen? I love the comments in the chat about what they've shared. The things that I shared in my reflection with you, Sharon, was I love you, thank you, it's gonna be all right. Because 20 years ago, I was at the beginning of my campaign experience, and that experience laid the predicate for my teaching practice, right? Because I was so full of passion that it enabled self-destructive tendencies, right? So the 18-hour days, like for those of you who've heard me speak before, like the bourbon for breakfast and the cigarettes for lunch, you know what I mean, right? Like, so, and then cursing people out for dinner, right? Like, so those habits were formed 20 years ago. And they put me in a place where I had to stoke well-being. I had to create practices for myself. I had to seek out a new way. So when you offered us the chance to talk to 20 years ago, I was like, thank you for doing what you did, because you have helped make this guy possible, right? Like, there's no way I would have even been able to consider that. But thank you for that opportunity to reflect. And 20 years from now, I was just like, thank you, I love you, and damn, you're doing good. Lovely reflections. Right, and so Claire, I would love to toss it to you, if you're with us, to see what questions folks may have for us, so we may be of service to the community here with us.
Thank you, Reggie. It's been a beautiful conversation so far, and to echo you and Sharon, just thank you for all the comments in the chat. Would love to invite more questions. What's emerging for you? What's coming to mind? What memories or areas would you love to bring into the conversation? Just throw into the chat. We're keeping an eye on those. One question that came up is around beyond age. Sharon, you mentioned a bit ago how elderhood, if it comes through age, but it also comes in other ways, and would love to hear both of your reflections on how else do you arrive? How could we continue our training in elderhood beyond age?
Someone's put in the chat that younger people may see you as an elder, even if you're not, venerable age. And yeah, there's Reggie raising his hand, and that's true. And I think needing to honor that and enjoy that, because it is a reciprocal process. It's not like taking on a role that's somehow ossified, like I am the teacher and you're going to learn from me. It's a very dynamic process to convey what you know. And I think it involves being willing to be vulnerable and be honest about, what you had for breakfast and lunch, and it was bourbon and cigarettes and in the past, and that's a life, it's a genuine life, and really making a point. It's like honoring or respecting what you've done, and it may be not long term, maybe you haven't done it for decades, but you were willing to do something. Maybe no one around you was willing to do that, or you tried to make change. You tried to serve people. You tried to take care of situations, and that's fine. It's not conceit or arrogance to take delight in that. Even that's like understanding the power of goodness, good-heartedness, and it moves through all of us, and we can cherish that. Reggie is a perfect example of an elder in certain places.
Yeah, so I would say that time, here I go with my existential philosophy major, but time being the relative construct that it is, you can have a 2-year period a la the pandemic where there's such an intensity to the time that being present with that intensity kind of forges you in a way that yields wisdom, right? There's like the 20-year path, which is like light and breezy, or the 2-year hard study that you make it to the other side. And by virtue of the experience that you had, you have wisdom to offer. My teaching practice is proof positive of that. Like, I wasn't teaching 3 years ago. Pandemic hit, I was like, the ancestors were like, you're up. I'm like, up for what? Oh, you want me to teach? Right on. Whew, okay, here we go. Right. And so serving humanity for 3 years of the pandemic has not only allowed me to be of service, but it's allowed me to just like share so freely from the heart in that compassionate service, that in some ways I've become an elder in that way. Like most people weren't teaching didactically via the internet. Like I built my whole practice online. And so the intensity of the time or of a duration of experience is irrespective of age. And so that can also yield wisdom and eldership. Right. That's something that I came up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a question from Lisa here. Is there an element of calling in elderhood?
I would say you have to accept it. There are some people who, this is neither here nor there because we live the lives that we live. But, I've done it too. Like you reject it. Like I want to live my, like one of my cousins turns 38 on Saturday. And his younger brother trolled him and sent him a meme, basically like when a 38-year-old enters a party, the 38-year-old, someone's like, "What's up, elder? What's up, OG?" And the 38-year-old's like, "I didn't know OG. Yeah, I had to take a nap before I came here, but it was just a little nap." Right. So you have to accept aging. You have to accept it. Otherwise, it's not genuine. Not only is it not genuine, it won't be of service. That's what I would offer.
I think we have to accept a lot, because what I'm thinking now is somebody said, I love naps too. It's clear. I started teaching meditation when I was 21 years old. because my own teacher told me to teach.
Right.
And all I kept saying was, no, 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 can't do it, can't do it, impossible. Me? I can't do that. So in the realm of calling, yes, and I think we have to accept and recognize, that's why I said it's not conceit, it's not arrogance. It's like realizing, yeah, I am so moved by this effort, or by this practice, which gave me so much, that I am going to share, and people have said, like I've seen some of my own teachers when older teachers have died, saying, I feel really sorry for you assembled here, because you don't get a chance to study with that amazing teacher who's now no longer with us. All you've got is me. And then he went on to say, but I'm who you've got, so I'm going to do the best I can. And to realize that in any circumstance, you're talking to somebody or they're reaching out to you for wisdom, for counsel, you're who they've got, and that's where the conversation is taking place. And you can do a lot.
And just to add a finer point on that, Sharon, like if you're who they've got and you say no, that's not of service.
Mm-hmm.
And for those not reading the chat, Parker offered the best line ever: naps are an existential imperative. Gratitude for that wisdom.
If there's one thing that people take away from this call.
Yes, absolutely, Aaron.
We're gonna all dive into the couch.
I really feel like I found my people, because I'm all about the nap. I would love to ask a little bit. There's different questions that have come in around if there's a difference, how we might think about the difference or the connections between being an elder, learning from an elder, the storytelling aspects, and teaching and the practice of teaching. And I'm curious what comes up in the combination of being an elder, being a teacher, how those compare, or are they the same?
I'll take a stab at, and I'm just going to pair it with what Sharon said. Like, there's a reciprocity to it, right? Like you can't be an elder if no one seeks you. Like it has to be give and take, right? Like you have to be seen as someone giving something, and someone has to take it. It's like I heard an anecdote one time about, how do you know you're a teacher? It's like if you have students. Right? Like, right? It can be that simple. That's what I would offer.
Yeah, I was using the term teaching in a very specific way, more in the sense of there's a methodology or there's a practice, like I would have to sit at Reggie's feet to learn how to hit that gong and have it be a decent sound, really. Or someone wants to teach me how to sew, that's going to be a teaching, and it doesn't have to be that narrowly defined. It's the emergence of what happens when these two people are together with like a love of learning, and that's enough, to talk about that kind of eldership.
Elena just offered some delightful wisdom. Sometimes an elder teaches simply by listening. I mean, my mother's mother, who passed a while ago, I would call her and, like, bless her heart for her compassion. I would just talk, but it's not fair, it's not fair. And she would just listen. And she's like, you feel better now? It's like, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Love you too, mama. Bye. Right? Like, so just listening can be the teaching. Thank you, Elena.
Just want to really lean into that. I feel very grateful for the spaces in my life where there's been those moments of being received by elders as well, being listened to, and there's a different quality to that listening that's also such a gift to actually be received in that kind of way. I'll just speak in a way, like just to reflect a little bit of the experience. I've been sitting here with so much joy in so many different ways, and there's like a delight that's present that I'm feeling very, very deeply grateful for. And it's part of why we're so excited about this series. So One thing that we'd love to just share, and Reggie has made a number of call outs to this during this session today. We're actually structuring this webinar series differently than we have before. And part of that is to really bring through the voice of the community and to really have a space for community to engage more directly with Sharon and Reggie, and to have a space for practice to reflect on the kinds of things that we did over the month. So at the end of this month, the last week of this month, on Tuesday at the same time, we're going to host a session, which is a meeting space for the community to come together. And part of the question that we might hold in the meantime, an invitation might be, what might it look like to go out and to engage with an elder in a different kind of way? Or if you're an elder, to engage with some of the elders in training or the elders to be around you. And so to really hear some of those reflections in that space, what that's been like, what that's brought. We'll be sharing that invitation by email. I think the invitation is also being put into the chat, bringing it home. And so thank you, Claire. And so we'd really invite you to come into that space as well. Like the idea of like hearing from an elder, reflecting on that over the month and like looking at ways that we put it into practice, and then checking together as a community. In a way, we're setting up a Sangha to explore this over the next year. And I think you can feel some of the threads with which this is being held in this wonderful exploration today. Claire, maybe we should tell people a little bit about who the very first elder is going to be next month for the session as well. He's actually been a secret presence, well, not so secret presence on this call as well, on this webinar. And so, Claire, maybe I'll pass it over to you.
You know, Aaron, it's actually a surprise to me as well in this moment. So I think you have to do the honors.
Super. No, so we are very, very lucky to have Parker with us, Parker Palmer with us in today's session. He's been wonderfully present with us and sharing, like, I think one of the best lines of the session. I am definitely going to take away naps as an existential imperative. That actually feels very precious among the many other precious things that I'm taking away from today's session. But as many of you know, Parker and Sharon together helped host a space that's just been so exquisitely beautiful for this community over the past 2 years. And so we're really, really grateful to have Parker with us next month and in conversation with Sharon and Reggie. So something for us all to look forward to after the community session at the end of the month. And so with that, this feels like a great place as a moment of punctuation as well to say thank you to everyone for joining us. This feels like very much the beginning of a beautiful journey, and very, very, very excited for us all to be taking it together. So to sitting at the feet of elders. Thank you, everyone. And we'd love to just invite you to check out by turning your cameras on, and just if there's anything that you'd like to express, a thank you or something like that, please do open up your microphones and share that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love and grace. Bon dia, Wellington, Elena.
Bon dia, Reggie.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
So
you.
good to
Thank
see you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.